This is Gilgamesh. Something I have looked into, and I was like, I'm going to talk about this. The whole idea of arranged marriage. I want to go further into like the whole the idea of the white wedding dress. The whole reason that came out was that's supposed to symbolize to the guy that you're marrying, if you're a woman, you wore a white wedding dress, was that you were a virgin. That you didn't, your chastity was your virginity was there for him to take. That was the whole reason for the white wedding dress. Yeah. It's, and it's only a more modern thing that wearing the white dress, but women wear it not because they're symbolizing their virginity. And a perfect example of this was Billy Idol. He wrote a song called um, "Good Day for White Wedding." And you could read the lyrics on it. He's going after his sister because he thought it was fucking kind of disrespectful that she's wearing a white dress at her wedding when she was not a virgin. She literally was a slut, and he makes that very clear that he thought she was lying about herself to this man she was marrying by saying wearing a white dress that she wasn't a virgin. But see, that's what people don't realize. That was what the whole reason the wedding dress was. Is that you're telling the guy, hey, by the way, I'm a virgin. My virginity is for you to take. That's why the whole thing that women saved themselves for marriage. I'm not joking. That was the whole purpose. And the whole thing with arranged marriages, it was never about love. It was about, keeping your genes going. Yeah. You look at the animal kingdom and say the same thing with lions. The male lion doesn't stick around because he has a thing for the females. No, he does it to keep his genes going. And he eats first. He protects his genes. That's what the lion cubs, are. They're his offspring. So when he's gone and a new male comes in, the male will kill all the cubs to put the females in heat. Yeah. So he can spread his seed. That's essentially the whole idea of marriage was this, idea between families that we're going to get the best to have the best chance of our families surviving. That's why arranged marriage even happened. It was this kid, the wealthy would choose their best, let's say their son and their daughter over here, two attractive young people, and say, okay, these two we're going to make sure they're successful. They're going to get married, whether they love each other or not. This is a common practice in India, in Japan, China, and other countries. They still practice this. And it was common throughout, and go look at like the kings. Kings would just look out and find a woman, then say, you're now my wife. And she would be forced to marry him. She didn't have a say. Look at a good example is Diane. Princess Diane did not want to marry Prince Charles. She was made to marry him because it was an arranged marriage. That's why it did not work out. Neither of these two loved each other. They both cheated on each other. And Harry is in fact not Charles's kid because it's as Diane likes sleeping with a lot of, it's just the nature of their relationship. Charles was sleeping with his current wife, the gargoyle that he married. But this is common of royalty, is that the king just picks a woman out of all the women that they bring to him and say, okay, look at all these women. They're all pick which one you want, and the woman had no say. But yeah, this is something I wanted to go through because I hear people talk about, oh, you're not a man if you're not married or anything. That's the whole purpose of marriage was never about love. It was about keeping your genes going. Let's say, okay, I'll give you an example. Matt Christensen. Most people know who he is. Okay, he's married. He's about to have his second kid. He just posted on Twitter that of his soon to be second boy. Okay, here's the thing. If this was an arranged marriage, let's say his brother was a better looking, stronger guy, his current wife, who I get from seeing, when you look at his son, he's shown a picture of his son. His son obviously looks like his mother, so Matt's wife looks like a very attractive woman. Okay, that Matt's wife, if Matt's brother was better looking and stronger than him, and this was an arranged marriage, she would be made to marry Matt's brother. Not a joke, that's a fact. That's what arranged marriages happen to be. Chiefs do this, they essentially, you want the most attractive, strongest two people to breed because you want a strong offspring. That's why royalty families, like King Henry VIII, had so many wives because he was looking for a son. And then what would he get? A daughter. Yeah. He didn't want a daughter, he wanted a son. Because, the whole idea that, men are meant to, lead. Well, let's read this. First comes marriage, then love. In modern America, it is a given that first comes love, then comes marriage. But this has not always been the case throughout history. The idea that marriage is based entirely on love is a fairly new concept. And even in the contemporary United States, there are men and women who meet their spouse through either a matchmaker, which is true, or an interested family member. Oh, you see this in the Amish. You see this in even the Hasidic Jewish communities, where the wife marries a person not because, it's because the family set it up. You see this in the Muslim world. You see this in Africa. You can see this in Africa, in Asia. You can even see it in parts of America, like in, Amish communities. An arranged marriage is the union of a man and woman which is brought about by someone other than the bride and groom. It's usually the parents. Historically, it was the primary way in which future spouses were introduced, and arranged marriages still are a fairly common practice in certain parts of the world today. Learn all about the history of arranged marriages, how they have evolved over time, and the advantages and disadvantages of marrying someone you hardly know. Arranged versus forced marriage. Is it important to note that an arranged marriage is not the same as a forced marriage? Like a shotgun wedding that you heard about here, like a guy gets the daughter of a certain guy pregnant in the past, and the father's like, "You're gonna," and he goes, "No, I'm not." Pulls out a shotgun, makes the guy. That's a forced marriage. An arranged marriage is where parents say, "Okay, we want our kids to get together." In arranged relationships, couples typically have the choice of whether or not to pursue a marriage. Sometimes they're encouraged to do it. In forced marriages, consent is not considered. And that can also be the same thing with an arranged marriage, like the parents arrange it, but they say you are going to marry this person whether you want to or not. When did arranged marriages start? The basic mechanics of arranged marriages have not changed too much over the years. However, the practice has become less rigid over time. Arranged marriages were common as far back as biblical times and beyond. Yeah. And this is true. Go look at kings and queens, the whole idea of kings and queens. In the past, the kings just picked a woman to be their wife. They didn't, The traditional purpose of these type of unions were political, military, and social. They were commonplace among the royalty, mobility around the world. In ancient Egypt, for example, one of the chief goals of arranged marriage was to keep royal bloodlines pure. Yeah, sometimes that was inbreeding when some of these people were actually married to their own family members. Of course, breeding within a limited gene pool can result in some nasty hereditary illnesses. One only needs to look at the royal families of Europe as a cautionary example. So widespread was hemophilia, a blood clotting disorder. It's also what you can call vampirism, because vampires' blood can't coagulate. It was called the royal disease. Queen Victoria's son, Prince Leopold, was only one of the young royals who died an untimely death due to hemophilia. Arranged marriages are inferred to go back at least to the first modern human migrations out of Africa. Reconstruction arranged marriages in early Europe. The Romans also practiced arranged marriages. Daughters were a useful form of currency. That's true. That could be used to help form strategic alliances and strengthen the military position of the family. The royal princess of Europe were used in much the same way as the 19th century young girls were often promised to the sons of neighboring countries as a way of forming international partnerships. Yep, this is, in many cases, the marriages were arranged when the girls were babies, and in some instances, the marriage actually took place when the princesses were very young girls. Yeah, usually when boys, even to the boys, when they were still princesses. Yeah, they remained home with their family until they reached a suitable age and were then shipped off to their husbands. Yeah, see, what they said. One of the most famous arranged marriages is that of Marie Antoinette, the daughter of Queen Maria Theresa of Austria-Hungary. She was promised to the Crown Prince of France, who eventually became King Louis the 16th. Yeah, how did that end? Not good. Yeah, there she is. Marie Antoinette was married by proxy to the Dauphin of France, whom she had never met. Early controversy. Arranged marriages were hard on young noblewomen in times when travel was difficult. They were frequently married off to older men who lived far from their home countries at a time that was deemed appropriate. The young bride was sent away to live in a foreign land with a man whom she had never met. The important political advantages of royal arranged marriages made refusing to marry the appointed person impossible. And if the first husband died, the royal widow was often remarried to another useful man by her family. The involuntary nature of historically arranged marriages is what gave the practice a bad name. Yeah. Modern versus historical arranged marriages. Although arranged marriages are no longer common in Europe, they are still a frequent used method of matchmaking in other areas today. There are, however, some critical differences between historical arranged marriages and the contemporary variety. The biggest change is that in many cases, the potential bride or groom has the option of rejecting the mate chosen by the family, at least in theory. In reality, though, there can be enormous family pressure to agree to a spouse once both families have determined the match to be a good one. Compatibility is key. Another difference between traditional and modern arranged marriage is that the contemporary arranged marriages effort are made to ensure that the bride and groom are compatible. A key similarity between the traditional and modern versions is that the couple is not expected to be in love at the time of their marriage. This highlights a critical difference between love marriages and arranged marriages. An arranged marriage is more of a practical partnership than a romantic fantasy. If love grows over time, that is wonderful. If it does not, the hope is that the couple will at least form a strong partnership and build a life together. It should perhaps come as no surprise that modern arranged marriages are most prevalent in countries where family and society are more important than individual wishes. This is true. Arranged marriage marriage in India, past and present. One of the countries where arranged marriages are most common today is India. In most families, the procedure is for the parents or a mediator to vet potential spouses for the marriage age child, usually around age 22 for women. Once the promising candidate is found, the parents will talk often before the prospective bride and groom are introduced. Traditionally, if the parents found the situation pleasing or advantageous at that stage, the match was formalized and presented to the bride and groom as a basically they would, there'd be a, trade-off. The young man and woman had little chance to object and sometimes did not meet until their wedding date. This is true. Basically, they would broker, and let's say you marry my daughter, I will give you, if you have our son marry your daughter, I'll give you these 10 goats. Something like that. That's how they usually did these things. They still do them that way. In the contemporary form, however, young Indian couples do have a say in their fate. After looking a suitable future spouse, the two sets of parents will introduce the young people. They gradually have the freedom to get to know one another for a while before deciding on whether or not to be married. There is no set time by which a decision must be reached, and then there is a possibility that one of or another might decide not to marry the person selected by his or her parents. One must remember that when the possible bride and groom meet, they are not trying to fall in love, but to decide if they could marry the other person and become a family. This is very important distinction, as it is what separates a dating or matchmaking service from an arranged marriage. Although either party is supposed to be free to approve or disapprove of the future mate, family pressure undoubtedly plays a role. Yeah, they'll try to convince them because it benefits the family. They'll say it benefits your father's business if you marry her, even if you don't want to. In India, a very specific set of criteria is used to determine the compatibility between a man and a woman. Some of the factors in making a suitable match include reputation of the families, equal wealth, a shared religion, being members of the same caste, which is a horrible system, and whether each person follows a vegetarian diet or not. See, in India, they just don't eat beef. They eat chicken, they'll eat goat, lamb, but they just don't eat beef. So they're not really vegetarian. They do eat some form of meat. But they do eat vegetables too. The profession of the groom is also a very important thing that a family will consider. Certain professions are especially sought after when making a match, including doctor, lawyer, engineer, and scientist. The career path of the bride carries slightly less weight, although it is a bonus if she is a doctor, lawyer, or teacher. Whenever possible, efforts are made to pair brides and grooms who both work in the same field. This actually makes a great deal of sense, as they are likely to have similar interests. Often, the horoscope of the man and woman will also be examined to help determine the likelihood that the match will be successful, and certainly attractive candidates are also favored. Yeah, hot women and hot looking dudes. Oh yeah, if you're very attractive, you are fucking made. The samurai the samurai introduced arranged marriages to Japan. Japan is another society with a strong history of arranged marriages. Most young Japanese people today favor the love marriage that are common in the Western world, but it is estimated that somewhere between 10 to 30% of all marriages in Japan are arranged. Arranged marriage in Japan was initially practiced by the samurai class in the 16th century. Much like their counterpart in the European royal families, the samurai used marriages as a means to secure military alliances. The practice eventually spread to the urban class, and over time, a highly developed ritual formed around the process of arranged marriages. In Japanese compatibility, much like in India, potential future mates are first vetted for suitability and compatibility. The set of guidelines used is called Aigurira. Some of the key areas of investigation include education, income, status, religion, career, hobbies, interests, and appearance. Preferences is given to a candidate with samurai heritage, as family lineage is one of the most important considerations. Also, they don't like foreigners having kids with their people. This is true. In a society like Japan, which values ancestry and family family tremendously, it is not only the social status of the bride or groom which is relevant, but that of their entire family. There are cynics who claim that all the modern bride careers are the three H: high salary, high education, and height of a groom. The word investigation is appropriate in this case, as in some cities, private investigators are hired to ensure that the potential spouse has answered all questions honestly. Yep. Japanese matchmaking. In Japan, it is usually not the parents of the bride or groom who search for good marriage material, but rather the third party called Nakodo, probably mispronouncing that, might be a family friend or family elder with strong connections in the community, or it could be a professional hired expressly for the purpose of finding a spouse for one's child. The role of the Nakodo is clearly defined in the process of arranging a marriage. They will first work up the list of potential candidates and investigate them to make sure that they would be compatible with both the future bride or groom and their family. The parents will be given comprehensive reviews of multiple candidates from which to select. Once a good match has been found, the Nakodo will bring together the young man and woman and both sets of parents for an introduction. It is, if all goes well, a series of dates is set up so that the prospective bride and groom can decide if they would like to be married. The third date is the crucial one. If it is customary that on the third date the decision will be made about whether or not to wed. Because dignity is very important in Japan, there is a standard format that is used to avoid embarrassing someone with rejection. If the courtship is discontinued at that point. If the couple and the family decide to move forward with the marriage, the Nakodo will assist in working out the details. Not unlike the lawyer negotiating a prenuptial agreement, should trouble arise down the road, it is also expected that the Nakodo will step in to counsel the newlyweds and keep the marriage on track. After all, the work they put into making the match certainly has a strong interest in ensuring that it is a success. A tale of modern arranged marriage. Yeah, you can read that. Okay, is matchmaking the key to successful marriage? Perhaps the most interesting thing about arranged marriage is that there is still a place for it in our modern world. There has been an increased interest in arranged marriage in the United States. Not only among people who come from cultural tradition in which it is common. These days, there are some young men and women who are the ones requesting that someone help them arrange a marriage. They're not having one thrust upon them by traditional parents. One reason for this is the desire to meet a spouse who shares the same culture or religion. Matchmaking is still alive and well in some Jewish communities, often by using the Shadchan, a Jewish matchmaker. It is also seen among immigrants from countries with a strong tradition of arranged marriages, like India. Another arranged marriage example. An example of this is the case of a young man from India who had moved to the United States when he had completed his education and became established in his career. He decided that he was ready to settle down and start a family. The only problem was that there was a shortage of young Indian women in his community, and he wanted to marry someone who shared his heritage. The situation was to turn to his parents back home in India and ask them to locate a suitable wife for him. They did, and she moved to the United States, and the couple was married. It may not sound romantic to those of us raised in fairy tales of princesses, and undying love, but for this couple, it was a reasonable solution to a problem. As the groom said, once you are married, it doesn't matter how you got together. You have to work to make it work. Yeah. The second for the higher success rate, the search for higher success rate. This leads to us to another reason that some modern couples are turning to arranged marriages to find a mate. There is a belief among some that the high divorce rate in countries such as the United States is due to overly high expectations that marriage based on love will always be happy and fulfilling. This is true. People enter into arranged marriages tend to look at the practical aspect of forming a solid partnership with hopes that affection and possibly love will grow over time. It is theorized that a more realistic foundation of that marriage results in a commitment to the marriage through good times and challenging one, and in addition, with the emotionally charged nature of love removed from the equation, a more level-headed evaluation can be made of the factors which the couple may share in common. This is true. Love the commitment to commitment. Arranged marriage in the United States today. A fascinating case of modern arranged marriage in America is that of a man who decided to set a wedding date, but had no bride. Almost in jest, some of his friends sent out a press release seeking a wife for his friend, and to their surprise, they received hundreds of serious responses. Told you, love doesn't have shit to do with it. He ended up finding a suitable candidate, and in short order, the couple was married. The happy couple believed that their arranged marriage has succeeded because they are both committed to commitment. While most Americans are too deeply invested in the concept of free will and personal choice to opt for an arranged marriage, there are certainly for whom the idea of being matched with a spouse certainly beats playing the field and hoping for the best. Yeah, I've heard of the bottom line. There will be practice where the practice of arranged marriages go, and how will it evolve in the future. The chances are that formal arranged marriages will continue to dwindle in numbers as women and patriarch societies gain increasing economic and social freedom. Yeah, and then they end up alone because they're stupid. Their growing independence will inevitably result in reduced pressure to be married. Yeah, and then they don't ever get married, they don't have any of that stuff, and they end up alone. Just as it has in the United States. Yeah, and look what's happened. People are fucking women, don't find a man, they don't get married, they have nothing, and then, they end up alone. Where the average age for marriage matches marches steadily higher for every generation. No, actually, it's on the decline. That said, the modern version of arranged marriages, which can look more akin to matchmaking than anything else, will always have a role to play. As people become disillusioned by the abundance of information and choices, the social and familiar structures that used to help bring singles together continue to break down. There will always be those who are committed to commitment, who will be glad to have some help finding a spouse with whom they can build a life. Maybe marriage can indeed come before love. Yeah. So there's that, and then we have, well, this is the Wikipedia if you want to read more on it, which you can. Here's more on, arranged marriages, but the big thing I wanted, there's this, I already read that. Here's this. This is Native American marriage. Wanted to go into this a little bit. The debate over marriage in American society and the fears expressed by some conservatives that allowing diversity will somehow destroy the institution of marriage has been interesting and sometimes amusing to watch. Okay, clearly, I'm just going to stick to this. That thing looks like, sorry about that. You can read that article if you want, but I just wanted to touch on this about marriage because I thought it was an interesting thing about arranged marriage. Yeah. So, this is Gilgamesh. I'll talk to you later. Bye.